Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Hammered Corner. In today's video, we have an introduction into the coinage of James I/6th. On screen now, you can see displayed timestamps, so you can easily refer to parts of the video in the future. King James I was first crowned James VI of Scotland in 1567, ruling as King of Scotland for 36 years before becoming the King of England in 1603. James became King of Scotland after the forced abdication of his mother, Mary Stuart, or most commonly known today as Mary Queen of Scots, at the age of just 1 year old. Another troubled period of regency government ensued. James was brought up by his tutor George Buchanan. George's aim was to turn James into a God-fearing Protestant king who accepted the limitations of monarchy. He was also encouraged to despise his own mother for her treachery and unashamed Roman Catholicism. George was only partially successful in these aims, and James certainly disagreed with him about the limitations of monarchy. Questions over James's dedication to the Protestant cause led to a group of nobles led by William Ruthven kidnapping James and holding him hostage in 1583. The saga, later referred to as the Ruthven Raid, lasted only a year. Ruthven was executed and James brought the Church of Scotland under his firm control. James was a great supporter of Elizabeth I. With Elizabeth aging and without an heir, James realised that he had the strongest claim to succeed her. As the great-grandson of Margaret Tudor, James was the closest relative to Elizabeth. Most importantly, he was also a Protestant. The only problem was the question of what to do with Mary Stuart, James's mother. Since 1568, Mary had been captive of Elizabeth in England. During her years of captivity, Mary had been the focus of several plots to release her and place her on the English throne. She was smart enough to avoid being implicated until 1685, when she succumbed, by replying to the conspirators of the Babington plot, where they planned to assassinate Queen Elizabeth I and put Mary on the English throne. She had at that point signed her own death warrant. Mary was tried and sentenced to death in 1587. But how would James react to Elizabeth's intention to execute his mother? If he acted to protect his mother, he would surely forfeit all right to succeed Elizabeth. If he did nothing, how would the Scottish nobles react? James followed his ambitions. Although he protested and asked Elizabeth to exile Mary, Mary was executed. James then turned his attention to Scottish matters in 1589. He married Anne of Denmark and produced 3 children, Henry, Elizabeth and Charles. James spent his time rooting out witches from his kingdom. He also wrote books clearly demonstrating his style of kingship, believing in the divine right as king. As per all videos, more research material will be linked in the description. So now we will look into the denominations minted during his reign. There was plenty of gold variations minted under James I, like the very large Rose Real, with king enthroned with rose on shield pattern on the reverse. Such a beautiful piece that was worth 30 shillings. We then have the Spur Real, following the medieval noble design with the king in ship. We then have half-length busts on gold unites, right-facing busts on his crowns. He brought his own Scottish flower with the thistle crown. The angel, commonly pierced and used as touch pieces, and left-facing busts on his laurel coinage, plus many more variations at affordable prices. In 1604, the weight of the gold pound was reduced and the new coin became the unite. Fine gold of 0.979 and crown gold of 0.916 finesse were both raised by 10%. So for example, the Rose Real that was worth 30 shillings was, as of 1612, was worth 33 shillings. The silver coins minted during his reign were the halfpenny, penny, half-groat, sixpence, shilling, half-crown, and crown, not so different to that of his predecessor Elizabeth I. James decided to use the half-crown portrait of Edward VI, with king on horseback, rather than Elizabeth's 3/4 portrait holding spectre. By the time James was King of England, he was 37 years old, and the portraits of his coins didn't change or develop much, be it compared to the changes between that of the Scottish portraiture. So James coins are split into 3 main periods. The first coinage between 1603 to 1604, the second coinage from 1604 to 1619, and the third coinage from 1619 until his death in 1625. And by looking at the mint marks in the Spinks book, we can easily reference these symbols to the correct period and the exact year they were minted. And James VI brought over some of his mint marks from his time as sole ruler of only Scotland, like the thistle, for example. Now we must cover the Scottish coinage of James, being that his reign in Scotland was much longer. We're now stepping into a time machine and looking at some of the gold coins minted with the once baby-faced king. We have the £20 piece with half bust of the king facing right, the ducat with king facing left minted in the third coinage, the lion noble with crowned lion holding sword and spectre. Fractionals were also minted as 2/3 and 1/3 nobles, the thistle noble with crowned shield on ship. We then have the hat piece with bust in the tall hat facing right, the rider with the very unique design of armoured king with sword on horse galloping, and the sword and spectre piece. So if you're a lover of gold with deep pockets, James VI coinage has plenty for you to choose from. With coins minted in different periods, there's a rich history behind the coinage for you to research upon. So now we head on over to the silver coins minted in Scotland before his accession to the English throne. We have the real, or 30 Scottish shillings, 2/3 real, or 20 shillings, 1/3 real, or 10 shillings, the 2 merk, or 26 shillings and 8 pence, the merk, or 13 shillings and 4 pence, the half merk, or 6 shillings and 8 pence, the quarter merk, or 3 shillings and 4 pence. We then have the revaluation of 1578, the countermarked coins of his mother. Now the value of silver early in James's reign rose, and soon the metal content of the Scottish coinage was considerably higher than that of face value. Consequently, the silver coinage began to disappear from circulation, being melted down or sold abroad. In July 1578, the Privy Council passed an act authorising the revaluation of the coinage. Silver coins would be brought in by the mint and counterstamped, and then released to circulate at a higher value. A real, for example, worth 30 shillings face value, would be brought in at 32 shillings and 6 pence, re-evaluated and returned to the supplier with a higher value of 36 shillings and 9 pence. However, the mint collected a 4 shillings and 3 pence handling fee per real, so the supplier would get back a value of metal equal to that what he put in, while the state collected a 12% surcharge. This measure was very unpopular, and in 1581 a new revalued coinage had to be introduced. Higher denominations of this coinage are extremely expensive, with the book valuing the cheapest piece, the 2/3 real, in fine condition at £250 in 2020. So following the new revalued coinage, new and improved denominations were minted to handle inflation prices. This began in 1581, all the way to his accession to the English throne until his death in 1625. The denominations were the 60 shilling piece, mirroring that of the English crown, 40 shillings, 30 shillings, 20 shillings, 16 shillings, 10 shillings, 8 shillings, 4 shillings, 2 shillings, 1 shilling, the 30 pence, and finally the 12 pence. I feel sometimes the Scottish coinage can be overlooked by some collectors, but James' accession to the English throne and linking Scotland, Ireland and England makes for an exciting reign for us numismatists. So finally, we will look at the brief minting of the Irish coins that were produced under James after his accession. The war in the north had ended in defeat and famine for the native Irish, and though with the accession of the Scottish monarch, a general amnesty was declared. In order to replace Elizabeth's wartime base money, James issued a new coinage in fine silver between 1603 and 1607, which was minted in London. But his objective was a uniform currency throughout his realm of Great Britain and Ireland, and thenceforth only silver standard coins of the Tower Mint were made for use in Ireland. The smaller Irish shilling was then tariffed at 9 pence sterling, the groat at 3 pence. In 1613, the farthing tokens manufactured under royal licence by Lord Harrington were authorised as legal tender for use in Ireland as well as England, though this was not confirmed by the Irish Parliament until 1622. Though these coins were made for circulation in both islands, they are included in the Irish and Scottish Spink catalogue owing to the prominence given to the Irish harp, used as the reverse type, and because it has been suggested that the coins struck on oval flans were originally intended for use in Ireland only. So as you can see on screen, you can see some of the coins minted during James I. displaying the crowned Irish harp on the reverse. This is one of my bucket list coins, so hopefully I'll be able to find one in the near future in quite high grade. There were also copper farthings minted during the reign of James and his son Charles, but I shall let you research into that a bit more if that is something that you'd be interested in collecting. Spink recommends Tim Everson's The Galata Guide to Farthing Tokens of James I and Charles I. I will leave links down below. So there you have it, a brief introduction into the coinage of James VI/1. Please note that I may not have covered everything, and all the photographs and some information is courtesy of the Spinks 2020 and Spink 2021 book. If you haven't seen my introduction into the Charles I video, links are on screen and in the description. Thank you all for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a video here on the Hammered Corner. Thank you all for your support, and as always, keep collecting.